All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're actually pulling back the curtain on a highly confidential intelligence briefing from July 6th, 2026. What we're unpacking is a hidden massive phenomenon called hyper-concentration and how it is quietly but very aggressively driving almost all of today's global volatility. Let's dive in. To really understand our current world, we have to look completely past the everyday illusion of stability. We've gotten our hands on an executive terminal brief that synthesizes global markets, tech concentration, and geopolitical shifts to map our true current reality. And honestly, the insights here are absolutely fascinating. So here's our roadmap. We'll decode this situation report through 5 key areas. 1. The illusion of stability. 2. Global geopolitical fractures. 3. Capital and market extremes. 4. Ground-level consumer realities. And finally, 5. The volatility engine synthesized. Okay, let's start with Section 1, the illusion of stability. Intelligence analysts are using this brilliant overarching framework right now to categorize today's seemingly disconnected extremes. What it tells us is that beneath a calm, completely average macro surface, extreme volatility is churning across 3 main pillars: global fractures, market extremes, and consumer realities. It's basically the classic duck on a pond scenario, right? Gliding totally smoothly on top, but paddling furiously underneath. Moving right along to Section 2, global geopolitical fractures. We are currently witnessing unprecedented diplomatic shifts. European allies are initiating a literal experiment in what they're calling de-Americanization. Driven by these incredibly unvarnished private talks that characterize their alliance as a loveless marriage, the EU is actively exploring ways to just abandon its historic reliance on American unity, and they're doing this right ahead of the pivotal Turkey-NATO summit. But this shifting diplomacy isn't just affecting military alliances. It actually recently spilled directly into the World Cup. It started on match day with the U.S. securing a massive knockout victory against Mexico. But immediately post-match, top scorer Folarin Balogun received a super controversial red card, which triggered an automatic suspension for the next crucial game. So, with the star player benched 48 hours out from a winner-go-home match against Belgium, the Trump administration orchestrated a rapid diplomatic intervention directly from the White House. Just purely observing the mechanics here, the outcome was that the suspension was mysteriously revoked on match eve. It seriously stands as one of the most audacious political interventions in the 96-year history of the World Cup, and it perfectly highlights how concentrated political capital is being leveraged way beyond traditional borders. Let's shift gears to Section 3, capital and market extremes. $1.2 trillion. Just let that number sink in for a second, because it's hard to even wrap your head around. This jaw-dropping figure represents Elon Musk's current net worth, which was just recently catapulted by the June 12th SpaceX IPO. To really put this localized wealth into perspective, it now takes the combined capital of the next 5 richest people on Earth. That's Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, Michael Dell, and Larry Ellison, just to balance the scales against one single individual. This isn't just wealth anymore, it's a localized gravity well that literally warps the capital markets around it. Meanwhile, if we look at the broader AI market, we're seeing a rapidly narrowing IPO window. While SpaceX and xAI had the largest IPO ever, popping 19% on opening day, well, it now treats 30% down from its high. OpenAI is considering delaying its IPO to next year, and Anthropic still desperately needs capital to match these massive compute expenditures. The crucial point here is that immense capital demands are colliding head-on with a brewing public market wariness towards soaring, hyper-concentrated valuations. And let's see how this builds overseas, because it's wild. South Korea's Kospi index registered a massive 165% rally, but underneath that, an unprecedented volatility engine. Over the past year, the index had 77 moves of greater than 2%, compared to just 5 for the S&P 500. Why? Intense index concentration in literally just 2 chip makers, Samsung and SK Hynix. This volatility is being fueled by a voracious, highly leveraged retail appetite for single-stock ETFs. Now, this divergence creates a massive macro risk. While local retail is buying into the volatility with surging betting volumes, foreign institutions are actively fleeing it. We are seeing a rapid $100 billion foreign institutional capital exits in the first half of 2026. The warning signal is blaring here. Local liquidity has a ceiling, and when the momentum breaks, those highly concentrated local retail investors are the ones left holding the bag. Because capital is so fiercely concentrated in big tech and a few massive names, we are seeing the emergence of a classic, really powerful setup in other neglected areas of the market. It's known as a mechanical bullish contrarian signal. This basically happens when extreme capital starvation triggers a highly probable future price reversal. Specifically, the absolute primacy of big tech has practically starved the Russell 2000. Small cap equities are now the most neglected segment of the market, pushing implied allocations to an absolute 20-year floor. And it's this exact extreme neglect that acts as the catalyst to trigger this powerful contrarian buy signal. Simultaneously, there's another fascinating macro setup at play. Crude oil exiting its danger zone and dropping back into the recovery zone below $70 a barrel historically engineers a powerful 12-month tailwind for the S&P 500. In these specific environments, historical precedent shows the S&P gains an average of 17% over the subsequent 12 months. This bolsters consumer purchasing power and carves out a potential path to a 2026 S&P target of 7,750, driven heavily by an AI-fueled earnings bull market. Okay, bringing it closer to home, Section 4, ground-level consumer realities. So, how does all this macro-level concentration actually feel to the everyday person? Well, if you hosted a backyard barbecue recently for July 4th, you felt it directly. The cost of a typical 10-person cookout rose 9.4% year over year to nearly $74. But consider the breakdown. Ground beef, up 17%. Tomatoes are up 32%. And lettuce nearly 25%. Meanwhile, chicken breasts are actually down 0.8%, which is a really rare deflationary divergence right now. This highly localized inflation perfectly illustrates our theme of global fractures. Why the sudden price spikes? Well, shrinking domestic cattle herds are driving up beef prices. In fact, U.S. beef import volume has spiked 86% since 2021. Meanwhile, logistics disruptions resulting from the Iran war severely inflate the transportation and refrigeration costs for highly perishable goods like lettuce and tomatoes. So those global fractures literally manifest as a direct inflation tax on your weekend grocery bill. And consumer exhaustion isn't just isolated to the grocery aisle, it's happening at the multiplex too. We saw a harsh 23% plunge in overall July 4th weekend box office revenue compared to last year. Audiences are just aggressively pivoting away from concentrated, aging, multi-decade franchises. Take Toy Story 5. It managed only $31 million domestically across 5 movies in 31 years. Compare that to newer, reliable IP like Minions and Monsters, which raked in $159.9 million. Audience patience for legacy sequels stretched over 30 years is simply evaporating. Finally, let's pull it all together in Section 5, the volatility engine synthesized. We've traversed from the high-stakes halls of NATO diplomacy to the movie theater and the grocery store. And this culminating matrix reveals the ultimate truth of the briefing. Whether it's trillion-dollar tech titans like Musk, two-stock emerging market indices pulling capital away from diversified assets, or fracturing U.S.-centric security alliances, extreme concentration pulls capital instability into really tight nodes, leaving a fragmented, volatile vacuum everywhere else. The bottom line is that traditional diversification as a rule of thumb is just failing. You can't rely on the average anymore because the average is currently obscuring a deeply turbulent reality. So as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you to consider this. What hidden turbulent realities is the average macro surface obscuring in your own portfolio, your business, and your daily life? Are you actually prepared for the extremes?